helping you find the right tax professional and avoid the latest scams. This is Taxpayer Beware, presented by the California Tax Education Council.
Understanding taxes and our obligations is complicated, and let's face it, overwhelming for most of us. That's why millions of people will hire someone for help. But how do you know who to choose? And what if you get scammed? Where can you go for help? Joining us for Season 3, How to Spot Tax Scams and Avoid Fraud, is Antonio Vazquez of the California State Board of Equalization, or BOE for short. He represents 10 million constituents in the 3rd District, which encompasses Los Angeles County, and is the first ever Latino ever elected to the BOE since its inception in 1879. He's known for being a tireless advocate for improving the quality of life for all Californians, especially when it comes to taxpayer issues. So let's start with what we should look out for when choosing a tax professional, because California is one of the few states that has set standards we must follow.
Hello and welcome everybody that's listening and watching. I think the key thing here is that many times, at least the way I came into this position, it was working actually with some of the small businesses. And many times, especially the nonprofit folks, they think they're hiring the right person to handle their books. And in many cases, they don't have the resources to hire a CPA. So they usually go with a bookkeeper, thinking that they're paying the right amount of taxes, only to find out in some cases 5 to 10 years later is when we get the call as a member of the board, and they're asking me if I can help them out because they're getting this huge bill from either the Franchise Tax Board or the Board of Equalization, depending on their status in their business. And at that point, usually, for example, just to give you an example, sometimes they owe $30,000 in back taxes, but when you attach the penalties, the fees, and the interest, it's usually 3 times the amount of what they owe. And for a lot of these nonprofits, it's difficult. They don't have the resources or the funds to make that payment. So just a word of caution, because people forget, I didn't even realize that when I was doing my income tax back in the day, that even though you think you're going to a credible professional that's preparing your income tax, and you submit it, in the fine print, you actually sign off on it. They don't. So legally, you're responsible, even though you paid somebody who you thought was doing the right thing and knew what he was doing, or he or she, what they were doing, only to find out that they didn't prepare your taxes correctly, only because in many cases they want to show that they're doing the right thing because you're getting some kind of a return. And that kind of is the hook. You say, oh, shoot, this fellow got me $1,000 back on my income tax or on my business tax. And when in fact, it wasn't done correctly. And once you get the audit, in many cases, it's usually 2-3 years down the road. So you're not only do you owe that money, but they hit you with an interest and a penalty and the fees. And that's the big surprise for folks.
Yeah, and Tony, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, choosing the right tax preparer or just choosing wisely is so important. Are there any questions or things that they should look out for when choosing a preparer in the state of California?
Well, in California, we have several watch groups, that are good. It's always probably good to log on to the Business Bureau website, because then you could see if that corporation or that individual has been charged with any kind of misdoings or misrepresentation, or if there's been any fee or actually any charges filed against them in the past where they've misrepresented or they've overcharged an individual or misrepresented their business. And that's kind of helpful, and because they'll give you their record.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, and every year the FTB, right, warns taxpayers to avoid, right, unethical behaviors, preparers doing the wrong things. Is there anything you can share about that process, or any stories out there that you've come across in regards to ghost preparers or unethical businesses or tax preparers?
Well, the franchise tax board used to have this mobile unit, and I'm hoping, and then with the cuts during COVID, they got rid of it. But I'm hoping that comes back, because what was kind of real nice about that is that it was a mobile unit that we would take out to businesses or a rec center or any kind of a nonprofit, and give them the opportunity to come in and work with them, and in some cases be able to assist them. But if it was more complicated, their business, at least we could point them in the right direction, and that kind of helped folks from being hit by some, like you mentioned, some of these ghost preparers that are out there. We're hoping we bring that back in the coming years.
Yeah. Are there any common things ghost tax preparers will try to do, offer, right? Put out there, that people can actually look for and maybe start to question maybe the things that they're seeing or hearing in regards to some fraudulent activity?
Well, the key thing that we're always telling people, not only in this, but any kind of business, if it sounds too good and if it sounds too affordable, that's kind of a red flag, because, if you compare it to the others, the ones that are out there, the big ones, and you see that you're getting such a great deal on this particular individual or company or business, that's kind of a red flag. We try to tell people. And like I said, I think the key thing, even if you think it's a reasonable fee that they're charging, you could always ask them for their legal name and look them up and just double check.
Yeah, I mean, I exactly. And or, right, they're offering some sort of refund that the taxpayer doesn't get the full amount. Right. Or even people won't give you a receipt, right, for the services. Curious if you have any stories or, in your experience, things that any victims that you come across or things that you've heard, that would give some people some examples to look out for.
Well, one that comes to mind is, sometimes these people will advertise or put out flyers saying, if we don't get you a return, you don't pay. Basically, right? There's no charge. And obviously that's not the case, especially on most businesses. There's I would say more than likely there'll be some fee that you owe something. It's rare that you can get away without paying. I mean, there's some good groups out there that'll itemize everything for you. But for the most part, if they're telling you or they're advertising or they're sending out information or e-blasts is saying, if you have to pay, you don't owe us anything. It's free.
Yeah. I love that you shared that. I think if it's too good to be true, right, you need to ask some questions. I've heard some stories where taxpayers actually, their preparers had their entire refund go to, right, their own account before they somehow gave a portion of their refund right back to them somehow. I think there's all types of things that people should be aware of and really just look out for. So I love that.
Well, the other one you mentioned, the other thing that's kind of key too is, especially somebody that says they've been around in business for some time and, they have the expertise to help you out, is to ask them for who they're working with or who some of their clients are, so you could check them out. Especially if it's a big business, if you're running a pretty good business or kind of a very complicated business, and you want to make sure that these folks know what they're doing, is asking for some references of some of their clients that you can call and check them out as well.
Yeah. You had mentioned something earlier about, hey, if you're the taxpayer, you're actually signing that tax return yourself. You're responsible for everything that's gone on to. And I think that's a misconception, right? And for taxpayers, right? If they're going to a professional, that all liability is like off their hands. That is not the case, right? If there's an issue, it's fraudulent. There's tax liability, right? That's owed in result of that, or penalties and interest, right? The taxpayer's the one that's going to right owe that and go through the hassle of that happening. And so anything
you're right on.
In regards to before someone signs a return, well, obviously that's a red flag if they don't ask you to sign your tax return. Yes. That's going to be a red flag. But anything that taxpayers should really look out for, think about before, right, signing their tax return?
But, I think you kind of hit it. One of the key things, if it looks too good before you sign it, maybe get it checked, get somebody else to take a look at it, because you're right. I had matter of fact, one of my neighbors that runs a business here he rents out vacation homes, and he was actually working with this accountant for, I want to say, a good 5 to 10 years, when he realized one year when he was audited that in fact he was never paying the right amount. And he was under the impression that, he went to, and he said he thought he was a reputable accountant that was handling his business, only to find out when he looked into it and he finally did the research and checked his background with the Better Business Bureau, he found out that he had several claims against him. But, this was 5-10 years down the road. And then he didn't realize that by him signing that, in fact, he was on the hook. He thought he actually attempted to try to go after the accountant that prepared it. But when you sign that document and that fine print, it says that legally you're liable, not the preparer.
Yeah, so important to ask a few questions, right? Think about it before you assign on the dotted line and ensure. And sounds like in that example, funds were being rerouted to other places. And so I think that's a great reminder, right? When you're reviewing or taking a look at your tax return that's being prepared for you, there should be, right, electronic disbursement of funds option, which I think is another red flag, right? If that's not being offered from the professional that you're going to in regards to direct deposit of a refund or an option even to pay liability, I think in most of the scams we're dealing with, it has to do with refunds. But we should really, really pay attention to, hey, what are the bank account, routing information and the numbers that are tied to the direct deposit that's coming from the FTB and or the IRS, and is it yours? Because there may be an issue there.
No, you're right. That's actually a good point. Because some of these folks, you'll find, like you mentioned, you get into some of these shady or ghost preparers that have these fictitious, not only names, but accounts. And you think you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. Now, now that we've given some things for people, for taxpayers to look out for, right, or to question, and really educated the fact, right, like as far as who's got the liability, it's you, right? And so let's make sure that we're not really getting ourselves into some challenges, right, that are going to hurt financially down the road, because it will catch up. Will catch up to you eventually. If someone is questioning something and or sees something, or someone, right, is trying to commit fraud, right, with how they're charging fees, taking, parts of people's refunds, where should they go, or where would they report a ghost tax preparer or someone that's maybe not, or potentially committing fraud?
I think the first place to go is to the Better Business Bureau, because they're kind of like this, you might say, where, everybody seems to be able to send their information and then they document it so they could share it with others. They're kind of like the clearinghouse. I think that would probably be the best. The other one, is also to let the Franchise Tax Board know, because we get a lot of calls on this stuff. And if we hear from you that so-and-so X, Y, and Z business is out there scamming folks, we can at least put out a notice and let folks know. I think the best thing to do is to get it out to as many people as possible, so the word gets out.
Yeah, I love that you call it out. Right, there are options. Better Business Bureau is one, right, for someone maybe operating without a business license. That could absolutely be true. So I love what you shared earlier. Like, let's look it up. There's a place you going. The list, whatever's on the window, is that the listed business, right? That's registered. I love that. We that's something that people can take a look at, and then right, going to the FTB or even California Tax Education Council, right, is a place that some people can go. But I'll just remind the audience, right, like if you come across that, you can reach out to the FTB. Their number is 916-845-6193. There's also, you can go to ftv.ca.gov to report any issues with tax preparers. And so I think there's options, right, to submit information or, right, a concern. And so whatever information you provide, right, the name of the business, you mentioned, like, make sure you ask for a business card, or like actually see the individual that's representing themselves, like what is their name, phone numbers, any information, right, that you can provide, maybe even the scam or something that you questioned that they may be offering you, or the fact that maybe they're trying to take portions of your refund or route your refund to any other place other than your own bank account. Right, any of those information would be awesome to share with the FTB and or CTEC.
And those same group, like the FTB, when you're giving out the number and the website, if you're in a situation where you've been audited and you owe this, you could also reach out to them for some assistance moving forward.
Yeah,
because you're going to have to make those payments and see if they can work with you at least on the interest, the fees, and the penalties. And once you explain to them that you were scammed.
And I will add something I did forget that I should have mentioned is, instead of if you didn't want to go on a website, and you didn't want to submit that, well, you can actually email the FTB your concern, right? It's FTB tax scams at ftb.ca.gov. And I'll repeat that, FTB tax scams at ftb.ca.gov, with your complaint, right? And if you want, please leave your contact information so they can get a hold of you. They needed to get more information, as well as to help you out there.
No, that's a good one, because when I helped out some of especially the small businesses that got caught up into this, and it turned out they owed, I think one of them was, they were going back something like 7 years, and they realized that they weren't paying the right amount. They were straight up. They told me, it says, I know I owe it. I don't mind paying it, but can they put me on a payment plan? Because it was a pretty big chunk of change that they owned. And then on top of it, just trying to get some relief on the interest and the penalties that come with it. And in most cases, they'll work with you on that.
Yeah, I completely agree. In my experience, even personally, the FTB, right, especially when someone's a victim, that's something that they'll want to work with you on. I think what's most important, right, is you're not running away from the notices,
right,
that you're getting, whether it's for IRS or FTB, and give them a call, right? And they're going to really look into your case. They're going to listen to what was going on. And there's lots of resources they have, right, to assist, especially if there's fraud in regards to your situation. So that's the best advice I can give, right? Don't run away from the notices. Let's get something, make sure that you're reaching out so they can start helping.
No, you're right. That's key, because sometimes you're dealing with these small businesses and they're just overwhelmed when they get the bill, and then they get the attachment that talks about the penalties and the fees, and they'll just throw in the towel. They say, you know what, I'm done, when they actually could have put together a payment structure to keep the business going.
Thanks again for joining us, Antonio.
No, thank you, because I think it's all about just getting out to the taxpayers, and especially these folks, many of them, these small businesses are really having a tough time. They're struggling, and this could actually collapse them, and I think whatever we can do to provide assistance. So I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for allowing me to share this information, and hopefully it reaches to as many people as possible to try to assist.
Absolutely. We appreciate it. Thank you so much, Antonio, for chatting with us today. As always, you can find more tips on the CTEC website. Just visit ctec.org. We also have a lot more episodes where we chat with the IRS, FTB, Taxpayer Advocate, and most recently, Kelly Phillips, tax columnist from Forbes. You can download them at taxpayerbeware.org. Thank you, everyone. I'm Ray Davis, and this has been Taxpayer Beware. We'll see you in the next episode.